As some of you may know, Undertale was recently officially released in Japanese, and because I'm a big fan of this game, I figured why not do a little comparison of the two versions for those of you who might be interested in what was changed in the Japanese localization. Now, I'm not going to go over every single line of dialogue because then we'll be here till next year. I'm just going to talk about interesting tidbits and what's actually changed in the translation. Though the first thing I like to talk about isn't actually related to the translation per se, I'm talking about the naming screen. In the Japanese version, in addition to Roman letters, you can also use hiragana and katakana. As some of you may know, if you input the names of certain special characters, you get a special message and you won't be able to use the name in most cases. These messages appear regardless of whether you use katakana or Roman letters to input the name. So, for example, I can put in Flowey in katakana or in Romaji and it still won't let me use the name. The exception to this is Chara, as I couldn't get this message to appear when I put the name in katakana, but it's possible that I just don't know the proper Japanese spelling of this name. Now, moving on to the actual game. The first character we meet is of course Flowey. His name is still the same in Japanese, and he calls himself Ohana no Flowey. He talks about himself using boku, which is the personal pronoun used primarily by young boys, though not only. In the next screen we learn that the soul, in all caps, was translated as tamashi, which is just a straight translation, and in Japanese it's written in katakana for a similar effect as all caps in English. Also, love and presumably EXP remain unchanged, though Flowey now explains what love means. This is important considering the reveal at the end of the game, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you probably shouldn't be watching this video, but hey, don't let me tell you what to do. One last interesting thing about Flowey's speech is that when you get him mad by avoiding his friendliness palettes, he starts calling you omae, even though up until that moment he was calling you kimi. Both omae and kimi are second-person pronouns, but omae is a bit more rude, which is consistent with his English-speaking patterns where he is all friendliness and sunshine until he decides to reveal his true colors. Afterwards we meet Toriel. Her name also stays the same, and I have a feeling this is going to be a pattern here. There is not much to say about her, honestly. She uses watashi to talk about herself, which is the most standard of all first-person pronouns. In English she sounds quite formal, in Japanese she uses polite speech. She also likes to end her sentences in wa, which is a very feminine sentence ending, unless you're speaking in Kansai dialect, but that's not important here. Next we get to our first save point, and if you're wondering how they translated the famous determination line, it's Ketsui o minagitta, which is a literal translation of "you're filled with determination." Actually, it's closer to "determination filled you" or something like that, but for the most part it's a straight translation, not much to say here. The interesting thing, and you might have noticed it if you know some Japanese, is that all the spoken text in the game is in hiragana and katakana, that is, they don't use any kanji. This is possibly a shout out to Earthbound, which this game was heavily influenced by, as in the Japanese version of Earthbound the text is entirely in kana as well. The signs in Undertale still use kanji though. And actually this one sign is a lot more wordy in Japanese than it was in English. In English it just says stay on the path. In Japanese it's more like once you have decided on your path, do not stray from it. Or something like that. Once we get into a fight with the dummy, we can take a look at the menu. Probably the most interesting thing is the mercy button, which was translated as minogasu. Minogasu means something like overlook or turn a blind eye to, so it's not exactly a literal translation, but that's what they went with. Another interesting thing to note is that when you finish a battle, the game says you win in English. But in the English version it was actually you won. So I don't know why they changed that, but okay. Next thing to talk about would be the translation of enemy names. And for the time being I'll go over the monsters that appear in the ruins. First of all, Frogget's name is almost identical in Japanese. Meanwhile, Whimsun's name became Nakimushi, and this is actually an interesting translation. Nakimushi comes from the words naku, to cry, and mushi, bug, but the whole thing is also just a Japanese word for crybaby, so there is some fun dual meaning here. Moldsmal was translated as Chibi-Kabi, where chibi means small and kabi is the Japanese word for mold. The Vegetoid is still a Vegetoid in Japanese. Megosp's name also barely changed, it's now Minigos. Lux's name remained the same, including the Lux Eyewalker joke. And of course, I wouldn't forget about Napstablook. Napstablook's name didn't change in Japanese, interestingly enough. And while in English all of his dialogue is in lowercase, in Japanese he ends his sentences in katakana, which can indicate strange intonation. There is also the translation of Dapper Blook, or the hat made of tears he shows the player when you pick the right options in battle. In Japanese, this was translated as Hiyari Hatto, or literally chill hat. Another thing worth mentioning is that as you make your way through the ruins, you bump into this very stubborn grey rock. In English, it talks in a southern accent. In Japanese, it's more of a tough guy style of speaking. It also uses oira as its pronoun, which is usually associated with, let's say, rural folk. Another interesting tidbit is connected with the Spider Bake Sale, which, aside from a slight name change, as it's actually a spider sweet sale in Japanese, there's this sign in a room full of Froggets, and in English it says, "Come eat food made by spiders, for spiders, of spiders." In Japanese it's 雲で作った雲のためのスイーツをどうぞお楽しみください, which at first glance translates to "Please enjoy sweets made by spiders for spiders." But 雲で作った can actually mean both made by spiders and made from spiders, so there is a bit of ambiguity there. Once we finally get into Toriel's house, I'm sure many of you will be wondering about the tsundere cactus in Toriel's room. Well, I'm pleased to announce that the cactus is still tsundere in Japanese, though the text is a bit different. It now says サボテン、ツンデレ属性の植物だ, which translates to cactus, a tsundere type plant, as opposed to the most tsundere of plants. In the same room we also have Toriel's diary with the skeleton pun. In English it goes like, "Why did the skeleton want a friend? Because she was feeling lonely." In Japanese it's instead, "Skeleton wa doushite tomodachi ga hoshikatta?" which is the same as the first sentence in English, and the answer is, "Samishiisa ga honemi ni shimita kara," because the loneliness pierced her to her bones. There is also an interesting change in the Toriel fight. If you check her info in English, it says, "knows best for you." In Japanese, it's, "Kore wa anata o mamoru tame," which literally translates to, "this is to protect you." And I think this is a good stopping point for this episode. In the next one, we'll be getting out of the ruins and seeing what lies beyond.